It's Halloween time. Okay, yeah, I know it's September, but let's get spooky season started, at least before Mariah Carey defrosts and lets us have the real spooky season. And what could be spookier than demonic possession, other than Mariah Carey defrosting? The idea of simply losing control of yourself is horrifying, especially if you take into account losing control as a metaphor for disease like Alzheimer's. Humans like to be in control, and not having control scares and disgusts us, just as the bundle of paranoia and xenophobia called Howard Phillips Lovecraft. I mean, non-Euclidean geometry, for instance, was one of his fears, and it filled the city of Relay, even though non-Euclidean geometry means it just violated one of the postulates of Euclidean geometry, which includes being able to draw a straight line between 2 points on a plane. So basically anyone who lives on a spear or works with spears are apparently magic users. But enough about hates people Lovecraft. Let's talk about The Exorcist Believer again. I reviewed this movie when it originally came out, and now that a year has passed, more or less, I look at it and see, what the hell? It sheds the Catholic framework of the original in favor of pulling from multiple faiths. Does it work? No. Just no. If anything, this horror movie is freaking hilarious. So let's dig into The Exorcist Believer and see what exactly went wrong. We open in Port-au-Prince in Haiti on the cusp of the great 2010 earthquake. This is the Fielding family. Obviously, the happy couple is doomed as all hell. In the aftermath of the earthquake, one of the doctors tells Victor that he has a choice. Because of the injuries his wife Serene sustained during the quake, he can either save his wife or save his unborn child. But not both. 13 years later, we see the daughter, Angela, is going through some old pictures. I do like the scenes between Victor and Angela. I just wish they weren't going for the darkness look of it all. I also like the scenes where Victor is working in the studio. He takes pictures of families all day as a professional photographer, and obviously this hits him hard. He gets to be the one seeing all these happy families with their chaotic kids, laughing, trying to get order. And Leslie Odom Jr. sells the Serene, why couldn't you be here with me? With little, if any, dialogue in these scenes. Meanwhile, Angela and Katherine, another girl introduced as a friend, go into the woods and do a seance. The girls go missing and search parties form. They find the girls' belongings in a flooded-out pit where they were doing their seance, and the pit also has snakes. At the police station, tensions run high while the budget for the lighting in this movie is clearly low. Man, how bad is the budget for the police department when it looks barely any better than the snake pit lit by a flashlight where they found the girls' shoes? The girls are eventually found beneath a barn. Seriously, why is every single scene in this movie poorly lit? At least here it makes sense. This is a barn in the early morning. The girls have been gone for a few days, 3 days in particular. However, from their perspective, it's only been a few hours. They also have very little memory of their experience. They do a battery of tests on both the girls. Gotta say, both these child actresses play the creepy child very well. It's more than just the creepiness from the girls, however. Black sludge is coming out of the walls and electrical anomalies are happening. Angela ends up getting violent and being forced into the hospital after a seizure. And at this Baptist church, which does communion, I haven't seen Baptists really do communion, but I know they do have it. Katherine goes on a hilarious diatribe about the body and the blood, repeating it over and over again and hamming herself up. This scene is stupidly written. There is no getting around that, and I do not rescind my praises for the child actresses, because when they aren't spouting horrible dialogue, they're effective. But no one can make this horrible dialogue work, not even the power of Patrick Stewart. I am sure of that. I know movies take liberties with theology, but the way Catherine's mother acts is very un-Baptist-like. She speaks more along the lines of a theology with more liturgical churches rather than the low churches Baptist denominations tend to praise. She describes the harrowing of hell akin to what a Catholic or Orthodox Christian would describe it, but not how the Baptist would, if they do at all. Meanwhile, Angela begins manifesting knowledge she does not know, such as the name of a former nun, or at least someone who was going to take the vows of a nun but didn't. While Victor rejects the mere existence of God and thinks his daughter needs to be institutionalized, the nurse does convince him that since she knows Angela has knowledge that she shouldn't, this basically convinces him, let's go with this exorcism. This is a problem I'll get into later. During the whole description about what is exorcism and this whole meeting with Chris MacNeil, we get the most frustrating scene in the movie, at least a contender for one of the most frustrating scenes in the movie. Chris MacNeil said that the reason she couldn't witness the original exorcism was because of the patriarchy. I will remind you, the original movie ended with 2 dead priests, an exorcised demon, and Reagan still alive. But oh yes, blame the patriarchy. The Exorcist was a tale of a desperate mother having exhausted all scientific possibilities to the point that she said, okay, I need supernatural help because my daughter is not my daughter. This line, however, makes Chris MacNeil come off as a woman who cared less about her daughter and more about the idea of power over the devil. That's just wrong. Oh, and when she tries to exorcise Katherine, Katherine gouges out her eyes while possessed. Her advice is the power of togetherness. I dub thee, Chris MacNeil, in this movie, an idiot sandwich. Meanwhile, the Catholic Church finds this whole exorcism bit dangerous for both the priest and the church. Not sure why they are saying that, because that's kinda obvious. And refuse to actually sanction this exorcism. You know, you could have just had them be skeptical of the whole thing, and that would just work. No need to deal with this contrived, we're not going to sanction it because it's too dangerous. But once again, this movie fails to understand how Catholicism works when it comes to exorcism. The rite of exorcism is a process, a roadmap for priests. It has no power of its own. The power comes from the priest acting in persona Christi. There is literally a verse in the Bible where random guys try to exorcise a demon, and the demon says something to the effect of, Jesus I know, Paul I've heard of, who are you? Before basically throwing all of them out. Authority. It helps. I could get into the whole deliverance versus exorcism bit, but honestly, who cares at this point? This guy is a priest. He should know better than to delegate authority to a random lay woman. The DIY exorcism clearly isn't going too hot. It ends with Katherine dead and in hell, the only person qualified to do an exorcism dead, and hey, Linda Blair's back. The frickin' end. This was The Exorcist Believer. That was crap. Let's begin with how this movie is shot. The mortal sin of environmental storytelling is not to have the environment change. This is Victor's house during his daughter's whole possession phase. This is Victor's house before she is possessed. See how bad it looks? Why does the snake pit where the shoes are found look better than the police department? I mean, really? This is not how you do environmental storytelling. This is basically saying, oh, look how spooky this is, but it just makes the environment run together. This is Fant Forstick's philosophy of environmental storytelling, or just the fact that they were being cheap with lighting. Oh, go on about how dark and gritty you are by turning all the lights down, but don't actually do anything to merit this, show this, or demonstrate how dark and gritty you are. Just basically tell the audience, don't show the audience, except this is showing incompetently and not telling. Then there's character-wise. Chris MacNeil is written as if she was Laurie Strode from the Halloween series. At least Laurie turned Michael Myers into mincemeat in that series, at least in the recent movies. All Chris MacNeil does is get blinded because she was too incompetent. I detest the idea that Chris MacNeil is more interested in power to drive out demons than she is in her own daughter's safety. It just reflects poorly on her and poorly on this movie as a whole. When these two girls aren't trying to out-ham the original movie and are honestly making it hilarious, they are good actresses. I just wish they were in a better movie. However, it's Angela who gets the lion's share of the focus because Victor and Angela are honestly more important to the plot. Katherine feels utterly tacked on. Victor, Angela's father, feels way more human and way more developed than Katherine and her parents. In fact, I don't even remember the names of Katherine's parents. Hell, I don't even remember Katherine's last name. It honestly would have been more shocking if Angela went to hell rather than Katherine, because Katherine, we don't know anything about her other than her whole seance bit. We're told a bunch of details about her at the police station, but we don't see much of her at all. As for the exorcism itself, it is painful. They do this coalition of believers, Catholic, Protestants, Hoodoo, and honestly, you don't have a framework. The original ran on a Catholic framework. At least the exorcism had a book where you had a whole rite to go through, and you sorta saw progress the more the demon resisted. Here, they are basically all taking shots in the dark with their DIY exorcism. And it gets the mildly qualified one, the actual exorcist here, killed. It also gets one of the girls killed. And if you know your Catholicism well, this makes everyone in the film look like inept dolts. Speaking of comparing this movie to the original, let's talk about how subtle the movie is. The original played up the fear of the unknown. Sure, you are walking into this movie knowing that there would be an exorcism, but the characters sure as hell didn't, or were completely skeptical of the need for an exorcism in the first place. Nobody knows all the details, and you can feel their fear and frustration when you basically don't know anything. You, the audience, do know something, but the characters, they sure as hell don't. That creates suspense. Your initial shock when you see things will be replaced with suspense on subsequent viewings. That is the sign of a good horror movie. That's the hallmark of all good horror movies. Here, we flat out get told that the girls ended up in hell and got spat out 3 days later. Thanks for speedrunning the battery of tests that these kids would normally undergo to see if they are truly possessed or not. We don't use this to build any dramatic irony, it's just a montage, a glorified montage at that. Thanks for telling us that the girls were in hell and got thrown out for 3 days. Thanks, movie. That could have been a nice, subtle hint at something, or some level of foreshadowing, or some opportunity to do something creative, but you didn't take it. This movie is a parody of exorcism tropes and the Exorcist franchise as a whole. It has no framework of religious reference, or at least internal logical reference to see their progress. Instead, it's a bunch of inept fools taking shots in the dark at a demon who is not Pazuzu at all. And then there is the whole trying to outdo the original by trying to be as so over the top as possible to the point that it is funny. This is why I praise the child actresses when they are silent, because when they are speaking while possessed, it is hilarious. The original was pretty hilarious too, with Pazuzu speaking through Reagan, but at the same time, I did admit I did laugh, but not to the extent I laughed at this movie. It's just that bad. So, how would I fix this movie? First, let's alter the nature of the two girls' possession for a bit, because as it stands, it's lacking. Katherine, like I said, is barely plot relevant. Either remove her or alter her role. I'm going to try to alter her role for a bit. And also, focus on the demon Lamashtu, the one possessing them. Have this demon use deception against the girls. Have Lamashtu give the girls what they want. Ability to talk to the dead so Angela can know Serene. Popularity, good grades, parental approval, whatever. That way, when the exorcism ultimately fails, it's not because of the ineptitude, it's because the girls are unwilling to part with what the demon gave them. After all, you don't have a nice time with a hostage situation when your hostage is constantly running back to the hostage taker. It creates an interesting dynamic because the possessor and possessed are not forcibly linked together by the possessor, but rather the possessor has completely manipulated the possessed into just running back to them. Those are just my thoughts. Please consider liking, subscribing, tipping the channel on Ko-fi. This is Cyril signing off.